So we're gonna kick it off as we always do. We're gonna talk the games we've been playing. We're gonna start with talking about, and spoiler, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because I finished it.
Yes, we can finally
have this discussion about it. So heavy spoilers, because we're going to talk the end of it. I mean, it's been 2 months, but the thing I'll say is like the biggest spoiler of the game is like the thing that you think happens does happen, but it's
not in the way you think it happens.
Not in the way that you think it happens, but also like I was confused that when you said like it felt kind of fumbled until now that I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like, no, you were absolutely right. Like it just, here's what I don't like.
Just talk about it.
Okay. So here's how I understand what's going on. So at the end of that game, once you get done with the temple, you come out and then Sephiroth kind of flies down. And you have like what I'd call like it's almost like the end of the third Lord of the Rings movie. There's like a couple different fake outs of her death where it's just like just
it's
fucking
weird
get it
because
over
you can't tell what's actually happening.
No, like they stretch that way too far. Right. Where I'm like, just get it over with, like at some point.
So like I had talked about before, my theory was always there were like two worlds running alongside.
I kind of wish that was what it was.
Well, here's the thing, though. So, and she was aware of what's happening in both, and that part is true because, like, she clearly can see the fracture of like these worlds, like, breaking apart. Which is, if you go back to before the game came out, where they had edited the end of the last game,
they edited.
And now the context of saying she doesn't like the sky makes sense because she sees this giant crack in the sky,
exactly,
of these two worlds kind of, joining together. So the part where she dies, it plays out much like the original game where Cloud can't control himself and then he comes down and then you stop it from happening. Or do you?
Yeah.
So that's what the part I didn't like when they fumbled it, because it's like
the way I looked at it is almost like it's like a multiverse thing.
Yes,
because it also seems like Zack's in a different world as well.
Yes, there are. So, and the way I think what you're meant to understand is there is your world, the normal world, and there is an alternate world where Zack did not die.
And then obviously an alternate world where.
But I think that's the only real change, because everything else, if you think about like what happened in the first one, he drags Cloud back. All that Cloud wasn't there to do all this other stuff, so explain why they got caught. That's the main like point of where it broke.
Okay.
It's where it seems like anyway. And then the end of this game is these two worlds literally like crashing into each other during this final boss fight. Because the final boss fight stuff is cool, where like you're going through different phases, and like one part you play as Cloud and Zack, but you play as Cloud and Zack together, which is amazing.
Which is cool. That's a good part
of it. It breaks out, and then you only play as Zack. But then like at the end it's Cloud and Aerith. But didn't she just die? Well, it's the other one. And so,
but that leads into the part of it that the biggest part of it that I don't like, which is I don't like the fact that they're still conversing. I don't like that because it cheapens her death.
Okay. It cheapens it because it's like, well, she didn't die in her universe, but she's dead in this one.
So like that,
but only Cloud can see it.
That last cutscene of the game where they're like out in the field. And then your buddies fix up the tiny Bronco. Like that's one of the most impressive cutscenes I've ever seen in a video game. It looks amazing compared to almost any other cutscene in that game. I don't know how it's possible, but it does. But then I'm let down by the fact that like this entire time, it's almost like he's schizophrenic. Yeah, like he's having this conversation with her, but nobody else can see her.
Because not only is he talking to her across universes or however you want to justify it, he seems to ignore the fact that everyone else clearly thinks she's dead.
Yeah.
And he's just like okay with it and doesn't think it's weird and doesn't interact with anybody about her. And then it turns out he has the black materia in his pocket. He's just like, oh, cool. And then he looks up and he sees the skies.
Yeah, and that's kind of the big reveal at the end.
But is this, does this come back to, well, he's crazy because of his body's degenerating because of the Mako stuff. So I think that's just the part is they don't explain it, and they don't explain it on purpose just to make it be super ambiguous.
Do you think that they had this idea mapped out, or do you think that they came up with it and that's why they went back and changed that line?
I think it probably didn't end this way originally, and it got changed.
Okay.
Because the changing of that line is only, I think it's only there to explain, I think, why Cloud sees the sky at the end of the game. Not even necessarily her.
Yeah.
Because you already know that from the first game, she has this like game knowledge where like she knows things that are going to happen. It's almost so I don't think it's for her benefit. I think it's for him. You know, I just don't like that it's not clear. Like for gameplay purposes, she's clearly probably dead. And the other thing I don't like about it is it completely leaves the door open in the next one for them to just be like, we can bring her back.
Yeah, and that's the other part I get to is like, so what's if this last battle was him being able to pull through and fight with Zack and Aerith, what's to say the end of this whole thing is, well, he pulls them both through and they're not dead actually.
So when we were talking about it the last time before you finished this, you kept talking about how you think it's going to be called Reunion. And
I think it clearly is because
you think it's about reunion of like Sephiroth and his mother and everything, but in reality, I think it's the reunion of the two worlds.
I think so too.
Because the end of the game is the worlds colliding.
Yeah.
For a moment where you're fighting Sephiroth and you're both taking him down, and then when you beat him, it separates the worlds.
Yeah.
And so Zack and Aerith go back off to theirs. And you go off to yours, but he can still like see Aerith across universes because he has this broken thing. And that goes back to the scenes like in the hotel where Aerith is talking to someone and you don't know who it is.
Yeah.
Because she can talk across these things. Mm-hmm. And clearly Red can do it too.
Yeah.
Because he always was around whenever she would have these conversations or like one-off things where, gee, that's weird kind of a thing.
Well, and they even show at the end when he's sitting with Tifa and she's crying in that field, like it kind of seems like he can also sense that
there's something else.
Right. Yeah, like he can definitely sense it. So
I don't like it because they don't commit either way.
They don't commit either way, and like I don't know, for me, like
because there's that split second where he saves her, and you're like, damn, they did change it.
Yeah,
and then no, they didn't.
And then I don't know, like the promise of this thing was a remake of the game. And I like, we talked about like, well, maybe it's not the remake that you think it is, but that's also not the end I want for this because that is like the most famous video game death. Like people that don't play video games know that.
Right.
Like that's a huge thing when it happened. And like, it bothers me.
We talked about how at the end of the first one, obviously the end of the first one is wildly different. You fight.
Yeah.
Destiny itself, and when it's over, it sets it up where anything is possible. And then it turns out that the second game follows the same path of the original like 90% of the time. Yeah, there's obviously the part 90%. Where like Tifa goes into the live stream instead of Cloud.
Yeah, which is
super weird.
Yeah.
Obviously, like the whispers are still here, and that's doesn't make as much sense, but I guess it kind of does. I wish they would have committed and been like, no, she's dead. Or no, he stopped her, because that was a huge moment when it seemed like he stopped it.
It kind of seemed like they were going to go that way.
Sephiroth has to back off, and then you're fighting with her, and you're like, "Oh my god, we did it!" But we didn't do it.
Yeah. Maybe I ended it, and then it made me want to replay the original. So like at some point, I'm going to do a run of the original.
The original,
it's been
97.
97. Yeah, it's been a while. So like
I did that not too long ago.
The last time I did that was probably like 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
So the PS4 version. So,
right.
But it made me, because I'm like, no, I kind of want to go back now and see, because it's been long enough where like I want to see these certain moments as they originally were and stuff. So, because like I remember good chunks of it, but there are certain things that I have forgotten. So, but yeah, that final, I don't know.
It soured me a little bit on the end of it.
It soured me, a little bit on like, well,
and it makes what are we going to do next? More upset that the next one is 3-4 years away, because the first one at least felt like you had finished the game.
Yeah,
you had finished that part of the game. This one, it was clear this was always where it was going to end.
Yeah,
but it's more of a brutal cliffhanger to have to wait this long.
It's an Empire Strikes Back type thing, yeah.
Big time.
It is. So, especially for those, there are people out there that never played the original version of this, and they'll play this, and they didn't know that was going to happen. So,
yeah,
that'll be even more of a crush.
You'll be even more thrown for a loop when you don't get an answer of what actually happened.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't even know how that. I don't even know how that would feel for somebody that's never played the original and played this. And that's a totally different feeling than you and I playing the game 25 years ago and seeing Eric die, and then now.
Right, but then you
experiencing this.
But then you can immediately continue the game.
And that's the other part. It's like, yeah, sure, but there's still another third of the game left. So
well, and like we talked about it too. Like, what is the rest of the game? Like, where are we going now?
There's so much into this game, and like, I'm not one that normally would complain there's too much content in a game, but when you're splitting this into 3 parts, now I question, like, okay, well, how much is going to be in that third game?
But they somehow made a lot of content.
But it can't be as long as this one.
I don't think
it will. Like, it probably will be like the first one, like 50 hours.
What I think they might do is because, so like Wu Tai is obvious.
Yeah.
We didn't, because we talked about it all the time, we didn't do it. And we specifically don't do anything with Sid or Vincent.
No.
And, Vincent turns out to be a little more important, especially towards the end.
Yeah.
But obviously he has his own entire story. So so that's a whole. We could make that 8 to 10 hours if we wanted to.
We got Sid's story.
We have to go back to Midgar, but there aren't that many other places left. Like Bone Village. Are we even going to bother to do this little mining game? There's pieces that it's. Are we going to do it? We have to go. Yeah, I
don't know. It's weird. It's really weird. So
overall,
I'll say this: before I got to the end, I was going to give it an A-. I ended up giving it a B+ because of the end, because I just soured me a little bit on it.
I would say it was probably 9 and then 8.5 once.
Yeah,
the whole thing went down
just a hair because of that. Because I'm like,
maybe it's better in context if you're playing all 3 of them back to back.
And that's the thing. We won't know for another 3-4 years.
200 hours of Final Fantasy VII.
That's what it's going to be when it's done.
But we won't know for a long time.
We're not going to know. So
until we get the trilogy released on PS6, you'll never know.
There you go.
I was glad to have it done because that was a nice 160 gigs off my PlayStation.
Yeah, God.
Because that install is insane.
That's one of the craziest ones.
But yeah, so that we'll say definitively end spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So